You know, I think there's actually a Chinese saying that you have to argue before you become friends. I think sometimes that's true. I've seen it over and over again in U.S. China relations. Sometimes you have to get mad at each other. Sometimes you have to yell at each other, and then the friendship actually comes after some of that. So George W. Bush, he loved getting together with world leaders. So one day, this was before the state visit by Hu Jintao. The morning of the visit, I walked into the Oval Office to do the final briefing for the president before we were going out on the White House lawn. And he said, "I'm going to do something different today, Dennis." And I said, "Mr. President, it's all set. We're not doing anything different." He said, No. He said, "Usually I sit at the table with the wife of the other leader, and the other leader sits at another table with my wife. But I want to have a good discussion at lunch with Hu Jintao. So I'm going to sit next to him." So we had to rearrange the whole thing, get the Chinese side to agree. But he said, "If I can sit and eat lunch with him, we can deal with some big issues together." And that was a very important discussion actually on North Korea. And out of that discussion, Hu Jintao sent an envoy to North Korea to talk to the North Korean leader about some of the things that happened in that lunch. So President Bush and his father both understood the importance of establishing the personal relationship. That chemistry between leaders can make an enormous difference. It can reshape the world. If two leaders can see that their interests, even if they don't necessarily share the same history or language or even values, if they can see a common interest that serves both their peoples, there were people in the Bush administration very close to the president who said you shouldn't go to the Olympics. Well, I'll tell you how that came about, and it's an interesting story. So when we went to the APEC meetings in Sydney, Australia, which was the fall before, probably November of 2007, the president had a private meeting with Hu Jintao. And the two presidents sat down, and the president said, "The Congress is going to give the Dalai Lama a gold medal. I have to be at that ceremony." And Hu Jintao started to disagree, and the president said, "I know you disagree, but let me tell you something else." And remember, this was a year before the Olympics. He said, "I am coming to the Olympics because, first of all, I want to cheer for American athletes, and secondly, I want to support our relationship." And he said, "So I'm giving you good news as well as bad news today." And from that day onward, anytime one of his advisors said he shouldn't go, the president said, "No, I've made a promise. I promised Hu Jintao at APEC that I was going to do this, and I'm going to do this." And he never wavered, even though many of his advisors were against it. And I had many arguments with other people in the White House about it. I think one of the biggest lessons is we will have rough periods, that this is not the easiest relationship to manage. One of the things I always said at the White House is there's no autopilot on the American-Chinese relationship. You can't just, like an airplane, put it on autopilot and it sails. It's not how this relationship works. This relationship needs constant care and attention. Again, as I've said before, I think candor, interpersonal ties, understanding between leaders is very important. Spending time with each other is very important. There is a language barrier, and that means that you have to spend more time because sometimes it's hard to communicate. But I think that in general, I'm very hopeful one of the interesting things, because I run a group where I take 5 Chinese students from good Chinese universities and 5 American students from good American universities, and I make them talk about hard topics together. One of the things I've learned is they are naturally globalists. And what do I mean by that? I use the phone. I use the internet. They live in the internet.
Right.
They live in this world.
Yeah.
And this world is global. The thing that I guess gives me most confidence is, as we were discussing, the newer generations. I think younger Americans and younger Chinese are globally oriented, perhaps understand better than older generations why we need to find a way to be friends, why we need to have a healthy competition. That is my great hope for the future, are these kids that I'm trying to train here at Georgetown.